Hey bakers, welcome back to my channel. I'm Angela from Cake Angel, and today I'm going to show you how to make a traditional holiday bread from Germany, which is called a Stollen. Now this is from the Red Path recipe book, and I will put a link in the comments for you. To start with, we've got 4 dried fruits: apricots, ginger, cherries and raisins, and to them I'm adding some orange juice. Now the quantities will be listed in the description below, so make sure you check that out. There'll also be a link to the book that you can purchase off of Amazon as well, and I highly recommend it. There's some fantastic recipes in there. So I've just stirred those together. We're going to let them sit for a while we carry on with the next stage, and this is actually making the sponge for the Stollen. I'm actually making this recipe dairy free, so we've got some dairy free milk, and to that I'm adding some honey. We're going to give that a bit of a stir together, and then to that we're going to add some dry active yeast. Now I'm adding just over a tablespoon here, and what this is going to do is sit for a little while and start to get a little bit puffy. You can see the bubbles in it there. Now to that I'm adding some all-purpose flour, and then once it's mixed together you're going to cover it lightly with some plastic wrap, or here as you can see I'm going to actually use a shower cap for this, as these are really great to reuse with different recipes, and the link for these is in my description as well. And then we're going to let that sit until it doubles in size. Now we're going to go on to making the dough for the bread. So I've got my eggs in my bowl already. So there's eggs and some extra egg yolks as well. To that I'm adding some orange and lemon zest. Then I'm adding a couple of different extracts. So I've got an almond extract and also my vanilla bean paste as well. And then finally we are going to add some honey to it. So lots of great flavors in this already. And you're just going to give them a quick whisk together, and then we're going to set that aside and go on to the next stage. Now there are lots of stages to making a Stollen, but it's absolutely worth it. Now that our sponge mix has risen a little bit, we're actually going to pop that into a bowl, because we need to actually use my stand mixer bowl for the next stage of the recipe. So bear with me, there are lots of stages here. So in my stand mixer bowl now we're going to start with our dry ingredients, which is our bread flour, some sugar, salt, cardamom and cinnamon. So all those really nice Christmassy flavors that you would have at this time of year. We're going to mix it together with the paddle attachment and gradually add our egg mixture to it until the whole thing is really well combined. Take your time with this. You don't want to just kind of dump in it all at once, because your dry mixture will get too wet too quickly. And as you can see, it's actually starting to crumble up a little bit. Now it does take a little bit of a while to combine together, but that is looking good for now. We know that it's all fully combined. Next, we are going to just take that stand mixer attachment off, and we're going to add our yeast sponge to it. Now you can see all those bubbles again in that. The yeast has worked really well here. We're going to pop that in, and then we're going to beat that in together until a rough dough forms. And that yeast mixture is actually going to be scattered through the mix as well. So you want to make sure that you scrape down your bowl. You don't leave any of that behind, because we do need all of this to make that really nice full Stollen. Okay, so now that that's all in our mixer bowl, I'm just going to go ahead and stir that with the stand mixer. I always start off with stir just to make sure it doesn't fly off everywhere, which occasionally stand mixers will do that with the ingredients. And then I've turned it up a little bit, and you can see already that it is starting to clump together a little bit more. Now what you want to do is just stop it periodically, just clean everything off, give it a mix down, clean it off with your spatula as well, until it does start to form more of that clump that we would expect. Now keep going until the sides of the mixer bowl start to look clean, as you saw there, and then we're going to swap over to the dough hook. Now that we're starting to make the bread, as it's technically called, what we need to do is actually enrich it by adding some butter to it. And of course, because I'm doing this dairy free, I'm actually using a plant-based butter for it, which is vegan, and that's perfectly fine. It works in the same way as regular butter would. and it's at room temperature. You want to make sure it's not cold when you do this, because that's not going to affect the dough really nicely. So make sure it's at room temperature and just take little chunks at a time. You can see here the bowl looks incredibly greasy at this stage, but keep going with it until you've added all of the amount that's listed in the description below. What I'm going to do here quickly is just scrape it down. You can see still some lumps of butter in there. We're going to keep going. It does take a while to come to that stage where it actually starts to clean off the side of the bowl as well. So even if you think that maybe you've got too much butter, just have a little bit of patience with it. It does have to knead for quite a while. And this is obviously why we're using a stand mixer too. This would take such a lot of time if you were doing this by hand. Okay, so we've just carried on. I've sped that up a little bit as I added the rest of the butter. Now you can see that it is starting to clump onto that attachment. So we know that we're almost ready for it to be kneaded for a while. I've actually sped this up, and it's going to be kneaded for about 3 minutes until that dough is nice and smooth. You can see obviously too that the sides of the bowl don't look quite as greasy now. It's actually cleaning itself off as it is kneading it, which is fantastic. We're saving our arms completely here by using the stand mixer. Okay, so this is what it looks like when it is ready. You can see that it's got some movement to it. And what we're going to do now is scrape off that attachment and actually transfer it onto our floured surface. I've just used some regular all-purpose flour here. We're going to dump all of that dough onto our counter and give it a quick knead. Now this was not a long knead at all. I'm just literally bringing all that flour in and shaping it into a round shape, and it looks nice and smooth. It's not glossy at all, so it's exactly what we want it to be. Now I've just popped it in a lightly oiled bowl. We're going to cover it again and let it sit for about an hour till it's doubled in size. And whilst it's doing that, we just want to go back and drain that fruit that we soaked in our orange juice at the beginning of the video. Now you can also do this with rum if you prefer, but we don't have any rum in our house, so I actually just wanted to use orange juice instead. Still going to get those really nice Christmassy flavours. Keep the liquid from it, don't get rid of that at this stage, just pop it to one side and then pop your fruit to the side until our dough is ready to roll out. So now I'm just going to reflour my surface, and as you can see on the right here, I do have my baking pan ready and it's lined with parchment paper. Our dough has doubled inside. You can see how nice and springy it is. So I'm just knocking down the air out of it, because now we need to scatter that fruit on it and start to build the stollen. So it looks like there is a lot of fruit, and don't worry if it seems quite wet as well. I'm just going to show you how to quickly overcome that, because this was a little bit of a wet mixture. You want to roll it up as if you were making a Swiss roll. Tuck the ends in as well so that the fruit doesn't fall out when you're working with it, and then just kind of fold it over on itself. Some of it will start to poke through, as you can see here, but as long as you have a little bit of flour on your hands, that's not going to be a problem at all with the stollen. So that looks perfect. I'm roughly stretching it to the rectangular size that we need, and the next thing we're going to do is actually add some marzipan to it. Now this wasn't included in the original recipe that I used, but I had some marzipan from a previous bake that I've done. So I'm just rolling that into a sausage, putting it onto one side of the dough, tucking it in, and then you can see that I've just rolled the other half on top of it. Now to make that traditional stollen shape, you just want to press down with your side of your hand, or you could use a rolling pin for it, just as you see me doing here with my hand. And then tuck those ends again if anything starts to sort of sneak out the sides. And also I recommend that you pick off any fruit that is sticking out at the top. That will actually burn when it's baking otherwise. And then we are just going to let it sit for a little bit longer to double in size for an hour, and then I went ahead and I baked it for about 35 minutes. So once it has baked, you actually want to check the internal temperature of this. It is such a hefty bread that you want to make sure it is cooked evenly throughout. We're looking for about 190 degrees Fahrenheit. And obviously, if you did add marzipan like I have, make sure that if you're hitting that marzipan, the temperature is right as well. You can see that we are around the 190 mark here, so I'm happy with that. It looks great, smells great. It's got a really nice firm touch to it as well when you touch it. Now what we need to do is we're going to carefully move it off of our baking tray onto a cooling rack, let it cool for about 5 minutes, and then we are going to do the last few stages. So remember that we kept that juice from the fruit earlier. I've gone and added some melted butter to that, and we're just brushing it across the entire surface of the Stollen. So the top and the sides, I should say, not the bottom of it. And this is going to give it that really nice glaze that you would traditionally have on a Stollen. Make sure you use all of it as well, and you get it in that sort of flattened area that we made on the sides. And then to finish it off, we are going to add some icing sugar to it. Now, the reason we're adding the icing sugar at this stage is that it will actually form just a really nice glaze on it too. You'll see that icing sugar starts to melt straight away. Then what you want to do is actually wait until the Stollen has cooled completely and go back and add the rest of the icing sugar to it. So this is perfect. It's nice and cool now. I'm going to cut it for you so you can see what it looks like inside. And look how great that looks. You can see all that fruit in there and that marzipan on the one side as well. So if you're not a fan of marzipan, you can just eat the other half of the bread, but it's perfect. It's going to be a really nice treat, and I cannot wait to try it. So as I said, this was quite a long process. Thank you so much for sticking with this video. Make sure you do check out the description for more details about the recipe, which I got from Redpath, and let me know if you're going to have a go at trying to make this. This is actually my last bake along video for 2021, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for your support for my channel this year. I really appreciate you being here, and I will see you in my next video.